What happens when two of the most plugged in people in digital care team up to help you make sense of the chaos? Welcome to Control Plus Care. I'm Michelle.
And I'm Katie.
This is your weekly briefing on the most important digital stories delivered to you in under 30 minutes. First, Katie, how are you?
Good. It's nearly Halloween. Bonfire night's on its way. I've turned on the heating. How are you?
My heating went on the minute there was a breeze. I'm not a stalwart. I'm not holding out. Get that thermostat switched on.
Oh, now I'm generally a firm, not before the 1st of November kind of person,
Absolutely
but
not.
the cold snap a couple of days ago made me give in finally. Also, even the cat was starting to look a little bit cold and I genuinely feared for my life. So
Oh, we're
heating
blaming the
went on.
cat.
Of
We're
course.
blaming the cat.
What's the point of having a pet if you can't blame them for things?
Excellent. Well, this is a very special episode for us because
Mhm.
we're going to be joined by our second ever guest.
Yep. In the second half, we'll do the news first. Don't panic. We'll be joined by Kate Doodson from the Brandon Trust. She's going to tell us all about their cyber resilience plans, the work that they've been doing, and a really exciting interview.
First, let's do what we're here to do and cover off the news.
And it has been a big news week, but we're going to do sort of short segments this time because I think probably the biggest report that's come out is obviously CQC's annual state of care report. And a lot of it not to do with digital, so not going to do a deep dive on the entire thing. But I do think there's some really interesting bits that we can pull out of the report, which really talk to sort of where we are on technology, some really interesting stuff on AI, and also things like the NHS app. So we've talked about all of these things before, Michelle, but always good to know. So I'm going to start off with a positive because it's not all a super positive read, I think it's fair to say. But sort of their patient feedback reports that in general, people over 65 had really good experience of things like hospital discharge. And I know we hear those horror stories in the news all of the time about when things go poorly, but it is good to know that on average, people are actually having quite a good experience of discharge. Um, and some of that is to do with sort of systems reporting on using really good approaches to data-driven using data to understand the needs of local populations, particularly more elderly and frail populations, and really starting to think more systematically about how data can be used in that way. But obviously, we all know there are still issues with data sharing. And while systems are trying to make things happen, particularly with MDTs, the workforce challenges obviously still hampering a lot of this work. So some way to go, but some evidence of good practice in this area. The report goes into quite a few case studies of where it's working really well, I'd recommend. And then when we're talking about AI in the report, I feel like I need to firstly do a bit of an apology to CQC. I have been known in recent weeks while doing speaking to say that it took CQC 20 years to say anything positive about digital social care records. So we're going to have to wait a while for them to say something positive about AI. And I'm going to have to eat my words. And sorry, CQC, because in this report, they do say that they know that GPs are using AI. They know they're using it really around sort of admin efficiencies and that sort of thing. And we support initiatives to drive positive change by using technology. So there we go. Got CQC being positive about AI in certain instances, which, yeah, apologies. But what was quite interesting, so they looked quite a lot at how the public and patients thought about AI, particularly in the context of primary care and in GP practices. And generally, people felt very differently about their attitudes for when it's being used for clinical decision making. So I thought it was quite interesting. 41% of people said they were positive about AI being used in clinical decision making, but 42% said they felt quite negatively. So there's about 18% in the middle who just don't know, I presume.
Big
Yeah,
binary, though.
very much so, 41 to 42%. Yes, very interesting. And then they also got feedback on what people were most worried about how AI might be used as part of their care. And really high reports. So 4 main areas were the AI making errors, staff becoming over-reliant on AI, loss of human connection, and one which I'm sure you'll be excited to see, Michelle, data protection and cybersecurity. I know, people are worried. So kind of a mixed bag about AI, but really intense research has been done, especially in the primary care space by CQC. They have quite a lot of guidance from a primary care perspective on AI. And while not all relevant to social care, I think it's probably worth people really having a bit of a deep dive into those pages in particular if you are looking to roll out AI in your service. And then finally, I wanted to touch on the NHS app and access to GP practices, because we've talked a lot about how using digital technology can sometimes limit accessibility to services for people and the risk of digital exclusion. So, what was really positive to see is that there was actually an increase in the number of people who reported that it was easy to contact their GP either through the practice website or through the NHS app, which is really good that that's increased from last year. But there's still like a sizable minority of people who really struggle. So it's about 35% for both practice websites and for the apps still saying it's difficult for them to access services. Again, a mixed bag trending in a generally positive direction, but potentially not fast enough if we're moving to go fully digital first.
Interesting. And I think the thing is, like you and I have talked about the NHS app, we are hugely in favour. But
Mm,
the speed at which it becomes undertaken, that gap between those who can use it and those who can't becomes really big.
yeah,
Um,
absolutely.
but I think we are both well aware of the challenges of our sector and social care. And to be honest, sometimes in the conversations that we're having around CQC, it sometimes feels like they're possibly a little bit blind to it. So it was actually nice to see in the report mention of the fact that social care is at risk of being left behind as data sharing capabilities increase and we aren't taking, health and social care with it. That
Hmm.
that is going to have a knock-on effect to some of the ambitions that there are around improving our health and care system. I thought it was really interesting that, as you say, CQC have always, as a regulator, been really careful that they're not a technology regulator, and they're not, and that's right. But we cannot get away from the fact that technology is impacting care at
Hmm.
a enormous scale and rate. So I thought they did a good job in the report of really appreciating where we are right now, where we've traveled from, and potentially where we're going. Like, it gives me confidence that they see that because sometimes when we're talking to providers, there isn't that sense that, CQC are on that journey with us. But, from this report, it seems like they are.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, while obviously there's quite a lot which is quite stark about the reality facing the sector at the moment in the report, actually having it laid out in that way is very helpful. It's an interesting read, if not necessarily the most exciting of reads. But just to sort of wrap up this section really quickly, just also want to say that there is an excellent shout out to the Vivaldi Social Care Project, which is an amazing project. If anyone's not looked at it, research through the Outstanding Society and University College London and Care England, all about how care home resident data can be used in health research to improve care outcomes for people. So do have a look at that.
Well, that's really good. And I'm sure there'll be more to say on that because where CQC leads, the rest of the sector goes. And I think it'll be interesting to see what some of the tech response and some of the provider response is to this.
Mm,
But moving on to our next story, it is an AI one, and one that I feel like is like an amalgamation of a lot of conversations that are happening at the moment.
mm,
So this was a story around set in China. So it's DeepSeek is the AI of choice because that is the Chinese LLM. It's about people increasingly using DeepSeek as a doctor in a system where access to doctors is difficult, where it's largely needs to be paid for. This was the writer talking about her own mother's reliance developing on AI. So we'll share the link in the show notes, but it's a long read article. Essentially, this woman's mother has some significant health challenges. She finds her interactions with doctors, aren't satisfactory. So she's been increasingly having conversations with DeepSeek and taking at face value what's said.
mm.
Um, I think we know, you and I talk to enough kind of AI evangelists that the entrepreneurs, the venture capitalists, and increasingly doctors and commissioners are pitching AI as like the salve for a system that is really under pressure. We know in social care we don't have enough carers, we don't
Mm.
have enough beds. We are really struggling to get the healthcare that people need so that their care needs can also be met at an appropriate level and that they're kept independent. And that AI is almost this magic bullet for that. I think on the other hand, you've got people who don't have the best experience with the health system, who have felt not listened to, who don't feel able to articulate themselves in that setting, who feel powerless. You know, between those two ends of the spectrum, AI is seeming pretty great. But as with everything, we just don't know what is being spat out. So I think the general rule of thumb at the moment is that about 15% of what an AI LLM will give you is wrong. If you don't know what's right or wrong, that's quite a big margin of error.
Mm.
When we're talking about health advice, and let's not forget how confident LLMs deliver this advice, that's, particularly worrying. Um, at the same time, we also talk about this, like this word reliance. There's data come out this week. ChatGPT reckon that about, it seems like a really small number, 0.07% of ChatGPT users are displaying symptoms, so like the very far ends of the spectrum of psychosis and complete like abandonment of reality when it comes to their use of AI. ChatGPT, where this figure is taken from, recently reached 800 million users, individual users a week. That means in any given week, about 56 million people are potentially showing these symptoms. That's an enormous, insane number.
It's
That
huge.
0.07% suddenly is incredibly huge. Like it's massive. So, we we can't underestimate the scale of this potential problem. And the potentially for me isn't enough communication that says, yes, the experience may be nice, but the output isn't, it's not correct. Sense. It's not an acceptable margin of error.
Especially when we're talking about medical health conditions, all of that sort of thing. And I mean, the long read is really, really good. But I think the thing which really stood out for me was how desperate this woman's mother seemed to be for human connection. And she kept saying the whole time, well, DeepSeek responds to me, it asks me questions, it follows up with me about how I'm feeling, all things that her mother's doctor can't do because he's so busy, so difficult to access. And it's a crisis of missing communication and connection that's driving the reliance on the AI.
Yeah, absolutely. Again, the human aspect is the thing that, if you read into it, is what she's really craving. She says, when she goes to the doctor, she feels like she's at the headmaster's office.
Hmm.
I think we can all relate to that in a way, where we've been at an appointment where we felt not listened to or rushed. The AI is there at the end of a screen, night and day. When the worry first occurs to you, you can go and ask the question. Just really interesting given where we are at the moment. So to wrap up Cyber Awareness Month, we have our second ever guest on the podcast. We're joined today by Kate Doodson from the Brandon Trust. Welcome, Kate.
Thank you. Really pleased to be here.
So Kate is you got one of these job titles, Kate, Chief Transformation, Performance and Digital Officer, swanky, at the Brandon Trust. And there you are a charity supporting children, young people and adults with learning disabilities and autism.
That's right. Yeah. So we support about 2,000 people across England with learning disabilities and autism, and all across England. So I feel very privileged to work for the Brandon Trust.
Oh, fabulous. And we've come across you because actually the Brandon Trust are doing phenomenal things in this space. We are big fans.
Really,
Thank
really
you.
exciting stuff.
Yeah. So what we thought we'd do is just ask you some questions,
Mhm.
just to hear a little bit about the work that you're doing, because as I say, you are coming highly recommended as like leading lights in this area. And, most social care organizations find this really intimidating. So we thought a chat with you might show them that actually it's not that scary and there are things they can do and the impacts can be really huge.
Yeah.
So you've been developing a cyber resilience plan at the Brandon Trust, and like, can you maybe talk a bit more about what that is, the process, why you approached it that way, and the motivation for the change?
Yeah, so we this started actually last February. So I went into a board meeting and the board said we need to talk about cyber. It was kind of, that kind of moment in time, and it was really that sort of what I would call that classic conversation of what are you doing about cyber, and
Always the
and
most helpful question.
yeah, and that sort of feeling of I think it's a we, not a you, going here. So it was a really interesting conversation. So I came back to our strategy day with some thoughts and questions to the board around what do you think about cyber? What's the responsibilities? Where do you live with this stuff? So that's where we were last February. And obviously since then, there's been so many attacks in the news, haven't we? We've had so many. And I don't know if you read the NCSE report that came out recently, the annual report, but it's saying that national incidents are doubled in the last 12 months. So, we're at that sort of size and scale now of it. So it really felt like it was that opportunity for us to say, right, what are we doing? What are we not doing? What are we not doing so well at? And actually having that honest conversation with board, because I think at board level, often it goes like this. What are you doing? We're doing everything. You don't need to worry. And board go, okay, I don't worry. And then something happens and board say, you told us not to worry. And so it goes on like that. Whereas actually what I really wanted to do was open the conversation and say, this is where we're good. This is where we're not so good. And actually let's have a conversation.
It's really interesting. I think you're right about the kind of like, it's we, not me. That is the conversation we have a lot of the time. So this is not a person's job. This is something much broader. So I'm just interested because obviously that's quite a short journey, really. But what surprised you most about going through that process?
Well, one of the things we did, if I talk a little bit about what we did, just to give you that sense of it first. So one of the things we did is from that early stage, I tried to move us into a new paradigm. So not talking about cyber security anymore, but cyber resilience. So, kind of get, and this is, I'm teaching you to suck eggs, but that sort of sense of, it's not just about the tools and the processes we do anymore. It's actually about what we do when this happens to us for real and how we detect and how we cope with it when that happens and how we get back to our position of trading. So changing that paradigm was a really big piece for us. And what really surprised me about that was actually how well people accepted it and went, you're right. You're right. It is us. We've got to understand this. And then the next question being, and what's my role in it? What do I need to do? So, so actually one of the things that I think I've really learned from this journey is let's not talk so much about the security, the tools, the technologies, the language that we use to gloss all of this up, but actually let's talk about those classic incident plans. What happens if we do this? What room are we going to use to have our war room in? What phone number are we going to use for calls to our staff? How are we going to do that sort of stuff? So that sort of paradigm shift has been really helpful for us as an organisation and our senior leadership team. I think also the other thing that really surprised me is I went back to the team and I said, right, we're going to do some self-assessment. So we're going to think about where we are now with this stuff. And so I Googled self-assessment, cyber assessment framework and didn't get anything. I got things that were, thousands of lines long and too complicated, or things that said 4 things. And for our size and scale, I wanted sort of something in the middle. So it really surprised me that there wasn't just a kind of a simple questionnaire that I could go through with the team and say, in terms of these areas, what are we doing here? What are we doing there? So in the end, we built one ourselves and, really happy to share that with others. But it just kind of giving us that sense of, what we need to do and where we need to do it. And then the next stage we did is we then put a risk assessment over the top of that. And that translated it back into the board language to say, these are the things we know we need to do, and these are the risks they present as a result. So that's the sort of, short level journey that we've been on. But those surprises as to where the support is was a bit of a shock for me, actually.
Yeah, I mean, I think what really stands out to me, talk a lot about this, about cyber and sort of how care organizations can think about cyber. But quite often we hear, boards aren't necessarily particularly interested in talking about it. So actually having a proactive board is really, really helpful. But also that it can feel quite abstract to people. And actually, that I really liked what you were saying about sort of really grounding it in the practical realities of what do we do? How does this impact me? What does it mean for my roles? So I just think it sounds incredible, really, the whole process that you've been through.
Well, thank you. Yeah, it's taken a lot of time, but what it has done is I think moved us into a direction of feeling, I wouldn't say we are mature, but what
Mhm.
I would say is that we are well versed now and we have a really good sense and knowledge about it. So yeah, so I think that's the position we're in.
Yeah, definitely. And I guess obviously it's been quite a robust process that you've been through. But is there any sort of things that you learnt along the way and you're like, oh, if I actually had to start again and do this, would I do it differently the next time?
Yeah, loads of things. I think I think um the big bit for me, and this is going to sound like I'm bigging you guys up, but the big bit for me was actually about realizing that there is quite a lot of support out there. So I started to go to conferences and sort of learn about bits and pieces, but it was more when I've met the human side of you guys and the human side of NCSE and all of those sorts of people that have said, yeah, talk to this guy, this will help you. Talk to this person, and they'll support, and and that's been really helpful in doing that. And so I think the thing I've learned is that next time I would reach out first and and say, what can you do to help? Rather than can you help me with this one thing? But actually, what could you do to help? And I think that would be my big sort of message back to anyone who's starting on this journey now is reach out to you guys on a human level and to others and really get that sense of it, and to others in the sector as well. So we now run a little sort of IT group of people that are sort of talking to each other, so reach out to the rest of the sector. um and the other thing in terms of doing differently, but I wish really there was something around that sort of benchmarking, sort
Yeah.
of that piece around saying, yeah, this is where you are now in terms of that maturity, but across that whole CAF framework, that would be the other bit that I would, well, hope that would happen out there.
Yeah, that's incredible. I mean, we also, just as a caveat, did not pay Kate to say nice things about us, but we appreciate it.
We didn't ask for it, but we will take it.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Good.
That's great. And I think the thing that like my ears pricked up at, because it's something we talk about a lot, is that translation piece. You know, again, the terms that you use in cyber versus the terms that you use at the board or the terms that you use at the front line are so different. And I think that in itself can seem quite intimidating for people sometimes.
Yeah, I think there really is a thing about board skills and knowledge in not just cyber, but in digital and technology as well. But there is a worry, I think, with a lot of board members around that whole topic. So this translation into risk was really helpful. If we don't do these things, this is the risk that we stand at, and this is what I'm prepared to tolerate, and I think this is what you're prepared to tolerate, I think, and we're way over that. So what are we going to do about it? So that was the kind of conversation that I think really helped us to get some investment from the board to be able to do some stuff, but also to say now as a result that risk is mitigated and we're now at this level. So instead of kind of all of that effort around benefit realization and return on investment, instead talking the language of risk really helped.
Great. So obviously, the thing for us is we come across organizations at all different stages of this journey. If you were talking to an organization that was like, look, Kate, we know that you've done a great bit. Where should I start? What should I do tomorrow? What advice would you give?
The advice I'd give is have a really good look at the CAF, the NCSE cyber assurance framework, and kind of it takes a bit of deciphering, but get that sense because it is in the broadest sense, I think, one of the best pieces that's out there. Um, I I also think there's something about being really honest and not taking, if anyone says to you, you don't need to worry about that. You should be raising the red flag and waving it loudly, because I think that's really old school technologist conversation. And actually, I don't think there is an organization out there after the last 12 months that would say, hand on heart, we are cyber secure anymore. You know, because if you think about the amount of attacks that have been just through simple, human conversations, or through just, non-malware, just native logins, none of us are cyber secure anymore. So actually having those honest conversations to say, we're not cyber secure, but we can minimize our risks in these ways at this moment in time, before AI hits and before quantum computing hits, we can say we've got some level of security at this point in time. So I think that's the point that I would suggest that people start. Also, I think there's some great resources on the NCSE environment as well. The My NCSE registering for the early warning pieces. I can't quite remember what it's called, but that way you're managing your domain in an environment that means that if anyone tries to poison the domain, or anyone tries to put in any new records, any of those sorts of things, it's so powerful to get those messages back to say actually that there's something happening here, because that's one of the kind of critical points. So I think the NCSE resources are really useful as well.
Right, and we'll make sure all of those get linked in the show notes as well for people, so it's easy for everyone to follow up and find them. Hey, it's been amazing having you here today. I'm really, really grateful for your time. It'd be great to know what's next for the brand and trust. What are your sort of digital, your cyber plans? What do you want to share?
Yeah, great. So yeah, we're rolling out the cyber stuff now. So we are literally in that process. So, rebuilt our BCDR piece. We're rolling out a piece of identity new software. So we're doing all of that kind of work as we stand at the moment. But I think the exciting bit that we're doing at the moment is building our digital strategy, which is all about how we reimagine care in the digital world. And I think, I know that sounds a bit grand, but I think it's a really exciting opportunity for all of us at the moment to say, how do we deliver care better in this digital world that we live in? At the moment, I think we deliver care in an analog world, and actually we need to almost reframe that and start to think about that way. So we've got care records, tick. Actually, how do we layer on top of that next piece? And how do we then leverage data, insights, wisdom? How do we get to that point in which we can start to think about predictive environments, preventative environments, reducing the number of hospital admissions through the fact that we've got data in the right places and showing the right information? And I think that's the piece that really excites me and the team right now, is how do we get that right for the next 10 years? So what we would like to do is to build a blueprint, really, that, and get other people involved in it and start to say, what might that blueprint look like for digital care over the next 10 years?
Really exciting.
Really
No,
exciting.
no big feat here at all, but but I think it's important that we do it.
We'll check in what, 2 weeks, and you'll have that done?
Yeah. 10 days, give me.
We'd love to be involved, just inviting ourselves along to anything you
Yeah,
need on that one.
absolutely.
Great. Thank you. Yeah, it'd be great.
Oh, well, thank you so much for joining us, Kate. That's been really illuminating, and hopefully everyone listening is going to also have gotten an awful lot out of that. As we say, we will share any links and the resources that you've mentioned in the show notes. But yeah, thank you.
Thank
It's
you.
a real pleasure. It's really lovely to meet you both, and thanks a lot for your time.
So now we are at our favourite segment, Katie.
The best bit of the entire podcast.
I mean, I think one day we're going to have to collate all of these into one place. And
Mhm.
maybe there should just be a Cyber Squirrels spin out. But, let's not campaign for that too heavily just yet.
Don't give Rihanna a heart attack about being like podcast spin-outs already.
So no, today we've got a nice story. For those that you aren't aware, Cyber Squirrels is our segment that we tend to do after some of these episodes get quite heavy. So we look for a light-hearted, a fun story, something that is just, completely unrelated to social care, but it's happening in tech that just gave us a little moment of like, oh, that's nice.
Hmm.
So today we've got solar fishing nets, which there's definitely a nature theme to these stories, Katie.
They just seem to be the nicer ones where they're supporting the environment and improving the climate. And, the one that I had as an idea about, we were going to talk about Elon Musk, and this just feels much nicer, honestly, to talk about solar fishing nets.
Go on then. You explain solar fishing nets to us.
So basically, this is to solve the problem of turtles getting caught in fishing nets, and quite often they die and they get really badly injured, and obviously save the turtles. We all don't use plastic straws anymore, so this is just going that next step further. So scientists have invented a solar powered LED green lights which can be attached to fishing nets. They're being used in Canada mainly, but could be used anywhere. And they reduce the likelihood of turtles getting entangled in fishing nets by 63%.
That's huge numbers.
It is
Brilliant.
really, really cute story. Really lovely to see how something which doesn't sound very high tech, LED lights, lots of us, I'm sure, have probably had them on a wall somewhere at Christmas, but actually can have a really meaningful impact.
Love it. That's a great story. And again, just this really targeted use of tech to solve an actual problem.
Hmm.
All day. Love it.
Yeah, so cute. So a brief one, but a good one this week.
Fabulous. Well, thank you for that. So, what happens when two plugged in people team up to demystify digital care? You get control plus care.
Subscribe now wherever you get your podcasts, and all of the links from today will be in the show notes.
And tell a colleague, especially if Cyber Awareness Month somehow passed them by.